Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I really appreciate you guys being here. I know it's early. I know that you have a long day, and my goal is to try and motivate you, even while talking about a difficult subject. Difficult subject like conflict. Before we get started, though, I want you to think in your mind, not out loud, of every dirty curse word that you can come up with. Brainstorm, just keep going. What dirty words do you think of? This is the best way to start a morning, all right? You don't have to say it out loud. Don't point at anybody, okay? Don't make it personal. This is just in your head, all right? Ready? You have like 10 seconds to just go through them. If you remember George Carlin, it probably will be easy for you, all right? So ready? You have 10 seconds. Think of every dirty word you can come up with. Ready? Go. Time. Now, raise your hand if conflict was one of those words.
Confession was.
That's a different session altogether. Does everybody get my point? I mean, none of you in this room put conflict down as a dirty word. So we have to start looking at conflict as just what it is. It's just another word. But everybody has this, remember, our long-term memory and our emotional center are in the third part of our inner brain. So we have this long-distance recall of the word conflict and all the negative associations that come with it. I mean, how many of you like conflict? Raise your hand. As I said yesterday, it's a growth industry. Tap into it, right? It's everywhere. You watch the news for 5 seconds, right? It's everywhere. Oh, I don't watch the news. Your students do. They're bringing their stuff that they have in their life, their socialization, the impact of media, school, peers, religion, family on them, and they're bringing it and dumping it on you. So for the next few minutes that we have, and we're going to share together, my one goal is to motivate you and to jumpstart you to think about the fact that you're actually possibly throwing away money by not dealing with the conflict that is in your school. Why? Because most of us, including myself, didn't go through K through 12 education or college or other education where they sat down and did units on conflict management and actually create fluency around it and then give you tools and skills that you can apply to make your life better, personally and professionally. So that's why, and if you saw the table outside, Conflict Master, most of you are probably master of your technical skill, whether it's jiu-jitsu, karate, Krav Maga, whatever you do. But are you a conflict master? And so here's this abstract subject, which nobody really likes to talk about or touch, and yet it's punching us right in the face every day. I mean, I don't know about you, I have a conflict when the alarm goes off, right? It's like, get up, go to the gym, turn over and go back to bed. So conflict is everywhere and it's all the time. So once we start to get a little bit more comfortable with it and start to slow down and get more tools, more skills to help us be more successful, we will be more prone to use a positive, proactive mentality and approach towards conflict as opposed to what I see is a fear-based mind. Why? Because people haven't been taught the skills. So it gets to the point where we're really good talking about it, and now we got to go do something and take action, and it's tough. For example, I used this example yesterday, so forgive me, but little Johnny is smelling up your gym, or Big Johnny is smelling up your gym. And now how many conversations have you had with your staff on the side about the fact that there's this issue and someone needs to talk to this person, and now we're on like day 4, and Johnny was really stinking today. Oh yeah, I smelled him yesterday. And what now add up the salaries of all the people that are involved in this conversation for as long as it goes along, and that's money that you're throwing away and you haven't even talked to Johnny yet. Usually it stops there because people are like, hey, welcome. People are like, hey, like we know we need to do something, but if we do it wrong, then we're going to get blasted on Facebook, and now we're going to lose this and that, and then they start to tell themselves stories. Because when we don't know the answer to something, we make it up. That's what we do as human beings. When we don't know the answer, we make it up, we tell a story. So, and we go, and it happens very quickly. Young man goes into a restaurant. He's seated at a booth. A young man comes in the restaurant, and he's actually the waiter, and two women sit down at the booth, and they're getting ready to order. And he says, "Can I take your drink, please?" And as he's leaving, one of the women says, "What are you doing later?" And he says, "Well, let me get your drinks, and I'll be right back." So he goes and he gets the drinks, and he comes back, and he puts them on the table, and he says, "You know what, Mom? We're going to the movies later." That's not the story that some of you told yourself, especially the confession guy. Right? Right? So we are quickly, instantly telling ourselves a story and then going down that rabbit hole, and because of it, we're probably not getting close to the solutions that we want. So because I don't have TV and all this, and I had some models I want to give you, I want to try and create some continuity and give you a tool that's easy, and if you have a pen, you're going to want to write this down. So Christopher Moore talks about, and remember, we're looking at this stuff in the guise of retention revenue as it relates to conflict management. There are lots of other things that you can do with respect to retention and revenue and all those types of things. That's not why I was put on the planet. That's not why I'm here today. Why I'm here today is to focus on conflict because it's one of those tough subjects. So, Christopher Moore, one of the conflict theorists who you really want to know this tool. This tool is basic. You can use it. Anybody remember those overhead projectors? You remember with like the glass and it would like have a gerbil running inside and there'd be a light that would show up and they'd have those things like transparencies, and you remember that? I'm giving you the transparency to conflict. Every conflict. First off, what is conflict? Conflict is a disagreement about where we're going or how we're going to get there. Right? You can go look at the politicians who are, even if they come to an agreement, oh, we're going to spend $100 billion to make this new thing. But you're not taking it from my district. Money's not coming from my district. So it's either where you want to go, we want to get a new gym. Oh, that sounds awesome. Oh, okay, well, we're going to pull from here. We're going to pull. That's where you see the conflict start to show up. As you see the conflict start to show up, when it's actually time to actually take action now because people have a disagreement on how things get done. And in reality, we move through 3 stages very quickly, but at different paces. Me, you, and the problem. I'm tired of that, it's not working. Me and the problem, not working. Forget the problem. Does that sound like any stories you've ever heard of one of a lead staff deciding to move down the street and take students because they moved through this me, you, and the problem, let's collaborate. They didn't like the way it was happening. They said, all right, I'm going to look out for myself. Start dropping hints in the class about, then all of a sudden they're gone. So conflict is everywhere all the time. So Christopher Moore talked about 5 sources of conflict. And what he said was, any conflict that you can come up with will fit into one of those 5 sources. So I want you real quickly to write down a common conflict that you might experience at your school. You don't have to write an expository essay. It could be a bullet point. But I want you to put something on paper to acknowledge some kind of general conflict that may happen at your school. It doesn't have to be with students, it can be with staff, it can be whoever. Everybody got it? Okay, here we go. So, 5 sources of conflict. This is the overhead leg. This is the transparency overlay that you're going to use. This is the 2 steps back of the tiger before it pounces. This is slowing down so that you can ensure that you totally understand the primary source of the conflict. Because when I give you these 5, you're going to look at your conflict and go, well, some of this, and it's some of that, and some of that. That doesn't help you solve the problem. You need to look at what the primary source is. I'm convinced we don't have an obesity problem in this country. We have an anxiety and depression problem in this country. So we won't address obesity until we look at what is the primary source. This is the same concept. First one of the 5, data. And as I give them to you, they get more and more difficult to solve, as you'll see. Data, information. Do I have the information? Is the information correct? Did you give me the information? Did you give me right information? Many companies have intranet. Intranet so that everybody can be on the same page. Because before it was like, what kind of health insurance do we get? I don't know. Where do we go from that? And it's like, what do you get? Oh, what's our vacation day? So they're like bouncing around and they don't know information. So they put it there. Data. Now we don't have conflicts on it. Everybody can go get the information. Data. Second one, interests/expectations. Huge. It's one of the places where you're going to see conflict a lot. Third, relationships. I just don't like you. I do a lot of my life by the 80-20 rule. And you're familiar with the 80-20 rule? I mean, even if you think about it, like 10% of your students, they're the struggle, it's just even to kind of stay in the game yourself. 10%, even if you weren't there, they would just be kicking butt. And then the 80% in between. Relationships. We don't have to like everybody, but we need to be respectful. Personally and professionally respectful. One of my terms to help reduce conflict that I got from somebody else that I love is to share with your people that you might be professionally upset. I like that phrase a lot. I'm professionally upset. Why? Because you're training with somebody who you care about. This isn't about how I feel about you as a person. I'm professionally upset because I saw you throw that kick 400 times and not one of them was right. And we've been doing this for a year. Now, I'm not saying that's how you're going to talk to your student, but I want you to see this concept of professionally upset. Goes, oh, okay, it's not personal. I get it. Hey, he wants me to be better. Boom, moves on. So we have data, interest expectations. We have relationships. We have next, structural. Structural. Meaning processes. How do things get done? There are conflicts that sometimes show up within the processes. That's why you hear the term process improvement. Finally, values. Now, can I tell you to change your values? Can I ask you to change your values? This is the interactive part. No, I can't ask you to change your values, right? You don't want to hear about that. Let's see what we get. Nice. Okay. I appreciate it. Anybody ever do the Myers-Briggs test? The personality assessment, where you get 4 letters? Remember your letters? Mine came out J-E-R-K. I was like, what the heck? So, values. You can't change people's values. You can't ask people to change their values. However, you can talk about how values show up as behaviors. So you can talk about behaviors. You don't have to talk about values, but you'll see those values will often, I believe in freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. That's a value. But in the school, when they start swearing and all this other stuff, that's a behavior. So when you can break the two apart, you can now go after something. Otherwise, it's this big mess. How am I going to go tell this person they can't say what they want to say? And you can't deal on that level. It's too big. So go back to your conflict that you wrote down and identify what is the source. Is it data? Is it interest expectations? Is it relationships? And don't say, well, everything's relationship. No. You got to find the primary source of that conflict. And it's got to be one of them. If you haven't noticed, they get more and more difficult to solve. I can have a data problem with you for like 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it very easily turns into a relationship issue. So now somebody comes along and says, well, you two are nice people. Why don't you just sit down and work it out and talk through it? No, because it's just give me the information. It's about data. This isn't about us as people. So taking those 2 steps back and understanding that this tool is huge when it comes to your success of being able to solve and handle conflicts of all different kinds. Anybody have an example you want to share real quickly? Of a sort of a common conflict and what you think the source might be? I want to make sure, it's really important that you walk out of here knowing exactly how to see these conflicts and these sources. Because if there's one tool that's going to make a difference for you with all kinds of conflicts, it's going to be this. Because this will allow you to set up to find solutions, the right solutions.
About another instructor not pulling their weight.
Okay, so another instructor not pulling their weight. Did you assign a category, a source for that?
Probably interest and expectations.
Right, makes sense, right? I expect you to pull your weight, or I expect you to do X, Y, Z. Well, I expect not to do those things. Conflict. Good. Other examples?
Parent complaints.
Parent complaints. What's the source?
I'd say interest and expectations.
Interest and expectations. It'd be very easy to go, well, it's relationships. How are they working in it? Oh, wait. Go back. You're going to find interest and expectation conflicts all over the place. And when you do that, it will now allow you to build more of a conflict fluency so that you understand the problem better and you can articulate the solutions that you need around this. You can even walk back and say, hey, you know, I think that, I'm not saying you do it this way, but we seem to be a little bit off on what we both seem to expect out of this project. Can we talk about that? Yeah, oh, okay, cool. Setting up for collaboration. How do we solve conflict where people don't feel blamed, shamed, and guilted? Because if they're blamed, shamed, and guilted, they're not gonna go get done what you want them to do. I don't care if it's a student or it's an adult. We all have control issues, all of us. We had them, you can see them from the little baby. Little baby walks over here, pick the baby up, he's about to fall, you move over here, what do? One of two things.
Cry.
They cry, or they walk right back to where they were going. So our control button starts from a very early age. So a lot of this conflict management stuff isn't about them, it's about us. And how do we get better at dealing with ambiguity and the uncomfortableness that happens when conflict arises? Because we already know most people are not feeling that comfortable with the subject of conflict. Now yesterday I gave out a tool, I gave one out to you today. You may or may have not had time. I'm only using it as a reference point. But if you're not willing to look in to see how much money your school might be potentially, or schools might be potentially losing, it means that you're sort of keeping your head in the sand because there's some fear-based thoughts around, well, what am I actually going to do with it when I find it? Yesterday, somebody with a school of 300 people filled out one of those calculators. And just to make it fast for you, the number was 70,000. So this individual felt that in their school of 300 people, that they could attribute $70,000 worth of conflict that's not getting addressed. 150, you're looking at 35. $70,000, that's 2 full-time people maybe. That's 40 students. Like, we're all like looking for this magic way to find all these students and blowing past all this stuff that we're doing and not taking care of correctly, which is resulting into dollars and cents and also stress. And particularly in a low margin business, right? I mean, it's a low margin business. You have one bad Facebook post from a kid or from a parent, and all of a sudden they leave, and then maybe they had a friend or two that was in the class, and they're like, hey, you want to go down the street and train? Yeah. Boom, 3 people. Why? Oh, because you didn't maybe solve the conflict as best as you could. And tomorrow, if you're still here, I started early so that people could do it. I'm going to be certifying people in a tool on how to deal with all the stuff that I talked about yesterday and today. All right? So the conflict calculator, you want to put an X on the map as far as how much you believe that your school may be losing with respect to it, regardless of the size. So if you're going to be viewed as a leader and thrive at work in the next century, you must develop your own conflict approach and develop a reputation for leadership and conflict management. And it's not this, because that's usually the way people deal with conflict, right? It's not me, it's you. It's you. You're the conflict. So let's talk a few more about solutions. We talked about these here, and it's important for you to identify accurately. I can't understate that enough. So another tool, and I'm not going to get into it too much, I want to talk about it conceptually, but I think you need to have structure for how you're going to grow high-performance teams. And so I use the Drexler-Civet model. It's both diagnostic and it's prescriptive, meaning we can look at our team wherever our team is and find out where we are on this spectrum, or we can build a new team. And you don't build high-performance teams, you grow them. And the research shows it takes 18 months to grow a high-performance team. That's a fair amount of time. So if you know it's 18 months to grow a high-performance team, why don't we get a model that we can follow and use to give us some structure to make this easier and cut down on the amount of time it takes for us all to gel. So you need to have some kind of model to help reduce the conflict so that people can understand why they're there, who they're working with, what declarations to the type of work are they making. Really important. We live in a society, unfortunately, that is not prevention-based. There are 4 books on how not to get diabetes and 4,000 on what to do when you get it. I've got 10 books, and I self-published, and I went to a publisher, and I talked about what I do, and they said to me, we have an expression in America, prevention doesn't pay. And I went, you gotta be kidding me, because that's what I've spent my entire professional career, just like us, right? Spending our entire professional career, whether we're teaching values, or we're teaching self-defense, or whatever we're teaching. So we have to get in a prevention mindset. No one's gonna, you're just not born with it, it's not the way it's gonna happen, and depending on generations, and I know some of you were looking for some answers about millennials, and the answer is, there are none. There are none. They are individuals just like all the rest of us. And for us to try and create some concepts that are gonna apply for everyone, it's not gonna work. And that's why the model that I teach tomorrow, and if you can't make it tomorrow, talk to me because I can figure out how to get it to you another way, makes it easier. It provides a skeleton for difficult conversations. You can use the plan ahead of time so that you don't feel the rush of all the chemicals and the flooding of the body. I mean, our bodies were created to fend off the saber-toothed tiger. There is no saber-toothed tiger anymore, so you're the saber-toothed tiger when we have a conflict. And everything happens in our body and floods the same way. Our pupils get big, our hands sweat, our heart goes faster, we breathe, and we're supposed to be effective communicators. It's like, wow, all this stuff is swirling and happening. I mean, think about this. Call out all the things that your brain does. Call them out. So assuming you had your coffee, and now your brain's working. What does it do?
Stalls.
Stalls.
Produces thought.
Overthink.
Produces thought.
Produces thought.
Memory.
Memory. Feelings.
Body
Muscle control. Now I want you to think of a time when you got really angry. Now tell me all the things that your brain won't let you do.
Process.
Think.
Everything you just listed. Essentially, you've been hijacked. Essentially, you've lost your mind. And the research shows that for 15 to 20 minutes, that you've been hijacked in a way where you cannot think the same way that you could before you got hijacked. So the stuff we're talking about with respect to prevention sets us up so that we don't get hijacked and do things that are going to create more conflict or more problems in a low margin industry. Microsoft doesn't care if they make an error, do they? Sorry, are we using Microsoft? Probably. They don't, I mean, these are big companies. They have lots of room for error. We don't have that kind of room. So we have to be precise, and we have to look for places where we can save money, and we have to look for places we can be better. And I'm telling you, conflict-related issues is where it's at. Another tool that I talked about yesterday and I'll mention today is having a conflict charter. So it's called a conflict charter, meaning how are we, and this is for your staff, how are we going to deal with conflicts when they occur? And the conflict charter is a document that you're going to write with your team. You're not walking in and saying, here's your conflict charter, here's the new rules that we're all going to live by. You make them together. Here's what happened when conflict happens. Here's the process. Here's who we go to. And you create it together. And then when something happens and they don't follow the conflict charter, you go, hey, wait a second, just curious, didn't we all create this together? Yes. Okay, well, what's going on? And you want to talk about how to create conflict real quickly? Keep using why-based questions. Keep asking people, why'd you do that? What happens when you back a skunk into a corner? You get sprayed. What happens when you back a human being into a corner? You get sprayed. It's just a different kind of spray. If I have nowhere to go, I'm coming back at you. Whether it's physical, or it's emotional, or the conflict where people say, you know what? I'm just not going to do anything. Can't get really in trouble if I'm not doing anything wrong, right? Or I won't contribute. I'll just sit on the golden egg in the meeting and I won't say what I know needs to be said because I'm tired of the way I'm being treated. Number one reason why people leave their job, lack of a trusting relationship with their direct supervisor. And in this industry, that means they go down the street. Number two reason people leave their job, lack of trusting relationships with their colleagues. So this concept of trust, while is often an overused word and is very sort of abstract, we've got to grab hold of it. We have to start to make the conflicts in our schools and our staff tangible. If you can name it, you can change it. If you can name it, you can change it. Now remember, with your conflict charter, that's a fluid document. You can all sit down and agree to change it. It doesn't have to be created in one day, okay? But it is something that will help people be guided towards how am I going to address conflict when it happens. How do I know when to go up the chain of command? Maybe the first thing you want to put there is if you have a conflict, talk to the person you have a conflict with, and then move from there. So other things about the conflict charters, it's used for growing high-performance teams. I'll just read you a couple of these. It provides structure for conflict resolution, the process, as I said, for how we're going to resolve it, and we're all getting buy-in because we're all agreeing that this is how we're going to solve the conflicts as they happen. So we've got the sources of conflict as a tool. We've got understanding that whether it's the Drexler-Civet model or some other model, we need to be able to build high-performance teams using a structure. Being able to. And as a good owner and leader, when you choose the one you want, you can go back and have one of your staff meetings and say, hey, look, I've got this model. I want to introduce it to you. I think it's going to help us gel and grow together and be stronger and be a better school. And then work from there. So, list off a couple things with respect to this conflict charter that you would like to have addressed in it. You're not writing it now, but we're brainstorming, we're keeping the energy up a little bit. What are some things that you would want to have addressed in a conflict charter if you had a document that was for you and your staff? Call them out.
Chain of command.
Chain of command. Okay, so what is it? What's that? Chain of command. What else?
Being on time.
Okay, so information around time and expectations. Good. What else?
Instructors buying into your vision.
Instructors buying into your vision, and one of the ways that you're going to get them to do that is by creating some document or some way for them to know what to do when conflict happens. I mean, how many of you had a conflict today of any kind? Okay, so a couple of you. I had a guy try, I'm not lying, 3 days ago, I had a guy try to start a fight with me in a bank. He was on a cell phone, he was having a conversation that you have in your house, and he was doing it at like decibel 10, and all I did was look back. And as I looked back at the teller, all I heard was, what, do you have a problem? What, you got some issue? Where do you want to go? I'm like, I had one of those like thought bubbles. We're in a bank. And I looked around and I looked at camera. And I thought, wow, you know what? I could solve this. I could manipulate this guy into moving towards me. I'm a Krav Maga guy, so I could deal with it. And then I could not sleep in my bed. I'd sleep in a prison. And I would say, but you can see how you incrementally. But if people are at a point where they're willing to start a fight in a bank over a benign look, over a cell phone call that's inappropriate, this is what's coming to our schools. So for us to believe that we don't have to get better at dealing with conflict is just foolish. I don't think that any of you are going to be able to walk out of here today and not go back and look at the calculator and look at the places where you or your staff or other people are contributing to taking money out of your pocket. Anybody here want to take a vacation? Feel like you want a vacation? No? Usually in this crowd, people are like, yeah, I haven't had one, right? But do you want to buy an app for your programs? Do you want to buy new equipment? Do you want to be able to buy mats? Do you want to buy that stuff? Then deal with the conflict and save the money in the beginning. Have a prevention mindset. Don't wait around. It's just adding commas and zeros to the problem. It's adding it to you, if you're a co-owner, right? Now all of a sudden, I've got an issue with my co-owner because we disagree on how to deal with X, Y, Z. Now we got the problem of X, Y, Z, and we have another conflict. So, conflict is not a dirty word. Would we agree that? Because most people won't look at it that way. They want to stay in this place, right? I don't want to deal with it. I'll avoid it. Does avoiding conflict work?
No.
Actually, it works just enough to convince us to try and use avoidance strategies more often. So we use avoidance oftentimes when we just don't want to get involved. And the problem is the calculator is going, oh, you don't want to get involved today? No problem. We'll add some commas and zeros. So what are you going to do about it? This tool is a very easy tool to use. It's a stop, start, continue. You make a triple T chart. Okay, so you know a T chart? You make a triple T chart. What am I going to start? What am I going to stop? What am I going to continue? in the context of how I'm resolving and how we're resolving conflicts in our school. The great thing about the stop, start, continue is you can use it for anything in life, right? You can use it, how are we going to grow high performance teams? Stop, start, continue. How are we going to deal with conflict? Start, stop, continue. And don't spend your time on the continue session. I know that's like, yeah, we're really good. Their continue session is like 10 feet long, but they only have 2 things that they want to stop doing. That's the trap. So if it's a stop and a start you need, instead of a stop, start, continue, then drop the continue. If you need the continue because you haven't had a little self-love recently or no validation, which is very important, by all means write it down because you're doing good things. And in this industry, and we're working so hard, sometimes it's very difficult to stop and realize that you're doing a good job. People don't walk around and pat people on the back. They point out what you did wrong. And in a world of social media, in a world where people are getting technically better at their stuff, it's easier to point out what's wrong. You see what's happening, you can't even make a mistake anymore in society, and all of a sudden you're on Facebook, you're here, you're there. And now it's your school, because you didn't address the conflict successfully. So you can make a triple T chart like this, stop, start, continue. So you could maybe, we're going to start to have a model that we can follow for how we're going to grow our high performance teams. Or we're going to start to use the sources of conflict model so we can be better at identifying what the true conflict is. Or we're going to start by implementing a conflict charter on our team so that everybody on staff knows how we're going to move forward when conflicts of different kinds happen. From little Johnny Smelling to sexual harassment. And you have a plan and people know it. And you can modify the document if you need to. Because you realize the document's not reflective of the reality that you thought of when you created the story. Remember, another tool to reduce conflict in your life is stop, think of the snapback. Speed up the amount of time it takes you to get back to stop telling your story that's a made-up story. Stop practicing bleeding. Right? The story that you're telling is probably not the whole story. There are 4 truths to any conflict. There's my truth, there's your truth, then there's the truth, which is some of my truth and some of his. And if we have to get someone else to come in to help us solve our problem, they bring a 4th truth. And at that point, what's the only truth that matters? The 4th truth. The one that we brought somebody else in. The 4th truth costs money, by the way. That's mediator, that's conflict manager, that's whoever it is. So if we prevent it from early on by using some of these tools, conflict charters, team performance models, understanding the sources of conflict and being more accurate around what's actually happening, you're going to deal with these conflicts better, less stress, less money, less allocation, less time. And the other thing is, how are you using this stuff as lessons learned? Like, it's very easy to, like, solve that problem, all right, move to the next one, solve that problem, move to the next one, solve that. And it's like, whoa, have you thought about collecting a list of lessons learned so that when your new staff member comes on 2 years from now, you give them a packet, and they're like, this is all we've learned in the last 2 years. Learning curve. Conflict. Probably not, because they already see how the culture has been set up. They look around, they see the trust that they get from all the people that are already there. Ben Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that leads me to the last piece to reference. And you can talk to me about this later. So tomorrow I'm teaching people what's next. Like, where do we go from here? And if you're not here tomorrow, I can make this stuff available to you too. This is a planning model. I've taught to a version of this to about 10, 12,000 people. I've co-authored 3 of the NASA's conflict management programs. And we've used a version of this. I've worked in corporate America using a different version. And this is awesome. It's a skeleton. So we have 2 types of conflict. The kind of conflict that shows up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we didn't expect it. And we have the kind of conflict we can plan for because we know we have a meeting with the person to discuss the next day. This planning model helps you prepare for how to deal with conflict the next day. You're using and thinking about everything going on for you, which is usually pretty easy, although you'd be surprised at how many people get into a conflict and they don't even really know what they need, what they want. And there's a big difference. So your other tool, your easy, your cut through the noise conflict management question of the day is, what do you need? You want to see conflict just fade away? It's, what do you need? Not what do you want, because it'll be like, you're off this, here's a box, get out, right? What do you need? Big difference. Anyone have kids? Think about the difference. What do you need? What do you want? Anybody have one that's getting ready to drive? Okay. What do you need? I need a car. What do I want? A Mercedes. Remember this, the great question of what do you need is required to have good timing. Because if we start this meeting, and the first thing that happens is, I'm like, hey, what do you need? He's like, I need you to back up and get out of my face. Then I'll get to what I came in here to talk about what I need. So timing is everything. Don't be so solution-oriented, because what do people often want? To be heard. So we've got to give them some of that space to be heard. You can ask people to bottom line it for you if they're going on and on and on and on. And you can use, and we can talk about it another time, different strategies on how to do that. But what people don't do, and they don't spend their time doing, is spending and thinking about what's going on for this other person. So the more stuff going on, the more conflict that's happening in the scenario, the more details, the more you need to organize your thinking. And this is a model that I've created to help you organize your thinking. Where are people before they start? What do they need? How do we use what I understand as their needs as a way to craft entree into the discussion so that it goes the way that I want it to? Because most people, well, we're here today, we've got to talk about this and that. It's like, whoa, like, can we have like a little bit of time just to say hello? There's some basics of respect that, right, that complement all these theories and this other thing, some of these basic things that many of you are teaching in your schools, probably most of you. And to be open for what can be crafted at the table. So I can plan and plan and plan, and I can think about what I'm going to do, and I can have a strategy, and I can start off with a great opening sentence, and there will always be information that you don't know. There will always be information that you don't have. The way in which you ask questions and bring that out will make a difference. Because do I burn you up in the process of asking you about the conflict, or do I get you to realize that we're setting a precedent? Every conflict issue has some precedent you most likely have set of how you handle the last. So if you don't address it well, you're going to find these conflicts will continue to snowball. And as I said, commas and zeros. So planning, how can it help me? Motivation to address the conflict that you know is costing you money, which hopefully as you leave here today you'll be able to do. It makes conversations easier, more positive. You've heard the expression win-win outcomes. Okay, this is a model that leads you to win-win outcomes. You can use this to deal with parents, students, staff, community. Doesn't matter what the subject is. That's the cool thing about the model. I'll give you an example. These predetermined outcomes are almost always opposite. So I must fire him. I don't want to be fired. You can go back and forth. I got to fire him. I don't want to be fired. I got to fire him. I want to be fired. Well, how long until we get to a solution? Probably not going to be a good one. It's going to take forever. But if we look at the underlying needs of what is driving, like a gas tank that is driving someone to be stuck with this predetermined outcome they had before they even walked into your meeting, and you know it, you can move that. You can create the right language, the right atmosphere to be able to have this person go, ooh, I didn't expect that. Tell me more. And that's when they're going to be open to hearing. And when we're getting people on the same page, we are not just doing the right thing for people, we're doing the right thing that's fiscally responsible for our business. And we're empowering ourselves to not have a fear-based approach towards this subject of conflict. Because we know, it's not a dirty word, the resolution team. Nobody really wants to deal with this subject. And so that's why when I came here last year and I saw this community, which I really wanted to be a part of, and I wanted to contribute in some way. So what I've done is I've taken negotiation, mediation, conflict management skills facilitation skills, that whole suite of everything, and I'm bringing it now into the martial arts community. Because I think the martial arts community is more, in many ways, primed and ready to talk about conflict because they know that fundamentally conflict is the source of where all your systems started. So, raise your hand if you were here with me yesterday. So just a couple. So I'm gonna ask for permission to retell my ending story. So let's finish up with this. So this good-looking man is wearing his beautiful new suit. He's got his bomber jacket on. He's driving a beautiful mini sports car. He's got some $300 shades, and he's driving down the road. And he's outside of the suburbs of Boston in the countryside. He sees a split rail fence. So he decides to follow the split rail fence. He follows it, he keeps going. He ends up and he finds a bunch of sheep behind the fence. So he parks his car on the side of the road, gets out, walks over, jumps the fence, and finds the shepherd. And he says, "Hey, Mr. Shepherd," he goes, "if I can tell you how many sheep you have, can I have one?" The shepherd's looking at 1,000. He's like, "Go ahead, sir." So the guy pulls out his phone, takes a picture of the farm, sends that in an attachment to a satellite company in Europe, which repositions a satellite and takes a top-down picture of the farm and sends back to his phone an Excel spreadsheet which says, he says, "Mr. Shepherd, you have 1,429 sheep." Shepherd's blown away. Man says, "Can I have my sheep now?" Shepherd says, "That was the deal." So man goes over, grabs this big sheep, takes it, pops the trunk of this little mini sports car, and he starts jamming this sheep into the trunk. And the shepherd's looking at this and he's going, "Whoa, stop, stop, stop." He says, "If I can tell you what you do for a living, can I have my sheep back?" And the man proudly says, "Of course." And the shepherd says, "That's easy. You're a consultant." The guy says, "How do you know that?" He says, "Well, you showed up when nobody called you. You asked questions and gave answers that nobody cares about. And you don't know a damn thing about my business. Give me back my stinking dog." So I tell this joke because I'm not that outside consultant. I have my conflict experience to help you with. I've been doing and studying Krav Maga for a long time and understanding the system. And I'm happy to be here, and if I can be a resource for anyone as a way to grow their business by looking at how to reduce conflict dollars lost, I'm here for you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.